Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome once again to the WP Builds podcast. This is episode number 259, entitled, How Do We Know What to Charge? It was published on Thursday, the 16th of December, 2021. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and in a few short minutes I will be joined by my colleague David Wormsley as we go through this particular episode. But just before we do that, a couple of bits of housekeeping. I'll keep this very short. Please head over to wpbuilds.com/subscribe if you like what we're doing here at WP Builds. Over there you will find a page and there's a couple of forms that you can fill out, 2 different newsletters for 2 different purposes, plus there's all the different ways that we communicate on social. So there's our YouTube channel, Facebook group, Twitter handle and so on. I'd really appreciate anybody who wants to join the community. That's wpbuilds.com/subscribe. The other thing to mention is our Mastodon instance. Now, Mastodon is a open source federated version of Twitter, and you can find it at wpbuilds.social. Yes, believe it or not, that is a URL, wpbuilds.social. And if you want to join, there's about 60 people so far. It's a little bit light on the ground, but if you want to swell that conversation, certainly go and subscribe, and I will authorize you into that group. That would be really nice. I know that Black Friday has gone, but we've still got our deals page on the go, wpbuilds.com/deals, if you want to find some WordPress deals that are there 365 days of the year. So I describe it as a Black Friday page, but for every day of the year, and you can search and filter for your own deals on there, wpbuilds.com/deals. Bookmark that for any day of the year. Another thing to mention is that this is going to be our last episode before Christmas, taking a couple of weeks off. So the next episode that we release will be on January the 6th in 2022. So if you notice that we're not coming into your podcast player, that's the reason. I think it's probably a good idea to take a couple of weeks off. I hope that you guys also manage to get some time off if the holiday season is coming around in your part of the world. Okay, let's get stuck into the podcast, shall we? As I said, it's episode 259, entitled, How Do We Know What to Charge? Now, this is the second episode in series 1 of a new series that David and I are doing. It's going to probably span maybe a year or more, and it's called the WordPress Business Bootcamp. And the premise is that we're starting right from the very start of our WordPress or indeed website building journey. We're trying to unlearn absolutely everything and go from the very, very beginnings. And today we're trying to figure out how might we charge. So we set up the debate, if you like. We talk about what the problem is, what kind of things do we need to be thinking about when we're trying to formulate what our pricing strategy would even be for our very first website. Perhaps we go for fixed fee, perhaps we do something more like value pricing, and then we go into the minutiae of the different tactics that you could employ and how you might develop your pricing strategy over time. It's a really interesting episode, and I hope that you enjoy it.
Hello, welcome to another in the WP Business Bootcamp series. It's the series where we relearn everything we know about building WordPress websites and running a web design business from start to finish. The premise of the series is that we have our first potential website client. All we know is that she's a lawyer in a large city. She's asked a mutual friend who thought of us. We have few skills and no business or processes in place. She has no previous website, no branding or copy. Nathan and I, as we go through the series, are going to be taking different routes to get our business going and our client's website up and running. So we are presently on season 1, which is in the series, the part where we are looking at the things that need to happen before we build. And we are on episode 2, where we are asking ourselves, how do we know what to charge? So, Nathan, Shall we quickly recap on where we were from the last episode?
Yeah, so in the first episode, so you'd obviously have to go back and listen to the previous one, we were talking about all of the things that would happen before the build in terms of realistically defining our business model. And there was obviously a lot to say there, but I guess it could be boiled down to just two different approaches. David's taking an agile approach where he's kind of iterating over a period of time, and he's doing little sprints, and he's trying to get the client's website built in that way. And my approach is going to be more the trying to figure out how to do it in terms of scoping out the project, giving a proposal, doing a contract, and then finally building it all and handing it over and saying, thank you very much, we're all done. So mine you could characterize as being the waterfall process, and David's you could characterize as being the agile process.
Yeah, well, a traditional model you're going for, which is strange for us because we're almost swapping around here, you know, with the kind of Apple and the Mac and the PC thing.
Yes.
It looks like I'm going for the trendy modern thing and you're going for the more stable things, which is
I guess the more traditional, the one, I mean, really the only thing that I would have known a few years ago. And to be perfectly honest, the whole agile thing is a bit of a mystery to me, so I'm kind of learning from you as we're talking over these episodes.
Yep, and I'm learning as I literally am. I've kind of moved that way without knowing there was a movement, and now I'm kind of working out what that movement is all about, and it's really more of a mindset. So anyway, how do we charge, which is, I think, a big problem. I see this in, lots of those kind of web design groups, usually related to WordPress that I'm in. It comes up all the time where someone will go in and say, I've got this job, it's maybe one of their early jobs, what would you charge for it? And pretty much what they get is lots of unsolicited business advice, and everybody's got a kind of different model in mind, and the prices vary. And I just don't think anyone knows, and I certainly didn't know. Did you?
No, and I'm still puzzled by it. I don't think I've reached any kind of perfect equilibrium and knowledge that this is the perfect way of doing it. Absolutely not. But I guess this is the bedrock of absolutely everything that you're doing, because essentially if your business isn't generating revenue, you don't really have a business. You've got a big hobby. And so you've got to figure this out. But what I would say at the outset is you just, to some extent, you are going to have to make it up. There's going to be a moment in time where you are going to think to yourself, is that the right number for me? And you're going to be able to say to yourself, yes, it's fine. If this project comes in and I can do 12 of these a year, then I'll be in profit, and I'll be in enough profit to make my life comfortable, or however you want your life to be. Or you're going to have to say, no, that number doesn't work, and have a bit of a rethink. But it doesn't really matter what pieces of advice you get, which route you take. There is going to be a moment where you are literally making things up, and I think that's one of the most difficult things that I find. You go into a shop and you buy things, and sometimes I'm really curious. I went into a shop, losing the plot a little bit here, but I went to a shop the other day and looked at a blanket. My wife wanted to buy a blanket, and I looked at the price and I was like, what? How does that blanket cost this much? You'll take it from this that I'm a skinflint and don't want to spend money on blankets. But the point being, I could see for me that blanket was literally 10 times what I thought it was worth. And so I just thought, okay, they're just making it up. And I left the shop, and it's fine. Probably they'll sell a boatload of them, and that's fine as well. But you've just got to get to the point where you're happy, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, there's lots of advice out there. The first kind of advice I heard, which we'll talk about the different models here, but assuming that you have to calculate how much you need to be paid for your time, the first advice I used to sort of hear on this was along the lines of you're going from being perhaps an employee to be self-employed perhaps for the first time, which many people will, and you'll need to calculate how much time is not productive, where you won't be doing the web design and stuff, all the stuff that's going to go, and all your costs as well for your business, your software, your insurance, your legal fees, all of those kind of stuff also has to be calculated in to kind of work out what you need as an hourly rate. And I think probably in some ways we all need to have that, but here's my problem with it always, and maybe is your problem. I didn't go and say, I'm setting up a website business and, the beginning of this month and I'm going to be working full time on it. There was always some other streams of income, or it was always done while I was also perhaps an employee in, some other capacity and stuff. So that never resonated with me, that approach.
I think you've raised a really interesting point, though, in that you have to assume that a lot of your time will not be working on the project. So, if you're incredibly lucky, which I would imagine what I'm about to say is almost 0% possible, in that you will finish a website and the very next moment, the very next day, a new piece of work will fall into your lap and you will embark upon that and you will finish it, and then the very next day or your roster is full and so on. There's going to be downtime. But also, something that I never thought about was the fact that I needed to cost in all of the things that had nothing to do with building a website. The time spent on phone calls, the time spent on contributing to my own blog or creating content, or the time spent putting Facebook ads together or Google ads or whatever it might be. All of these things. And also just the time spent where literally nothing is happening. You've got to have a bit of time off and holiday time. You've got to allow for that. So I didn't do here's the number that I need to be making each year, then divide that by the amount of projects, then add in some redundancy for the whole variety of things. And nobody taught me that, and I had to learn that the hard way. And in fact, I didn't even kind of learn it the hard way. It was hearing it somewhere for the first time that made me think, oh, okay, I need to do that more. I didn't even figure it out for myself. I had to hear it from somebody. And then I did start to do that, and that might have led to increased rates or just more thought about the way I was carrying out my tasks. But you have to think that a significant proportion of the time is not going to be spent actually building websites. That's very unlikely.
Yeah, trolling people on Facebook. That's
I mean, goodness knows. Yeah, how much time do we lose to social media? That has to be factored in. And I don't mean you obviously add that in as a business expense, but there will be a bit of that. There'll be some legitimate outreach on social media and so on and so forth. The thing about my model is really easy to understand in that I'm going to be proposing a website and I'm going to give you a number. At the end of my thinking about it, I'm going to come to my client, Mrs. A, this lawyer, and say, here's the figure. This is X number of dollars or pounds, and that's going to encompass everything. Now, maybe there's some wiggle room there, or maybe I add in some things. We might talk about that later. But I'm going to do that. Which is easy. It's really easy to understand. It's very easy to get a hold of. But the problems that come into that are multiple. And one of them is simply, you can be wiped out by a competitor coming in and just offering a small amount less. So all of this hard work that you've put into the proposal, let's say it's £5,000. Somebody just needs to come in at 4,500 who is, equal to you, shall we say. And mostly that's you out of the game, and it's going to be difficult for you to alter your pricing just because somebody else has gone cheaper. And again, we'll get into that. But it is easy to be outpriced if you go for that model and just offer one price. You've got to work really, really hard on the front end, making sure that there's something magical about your proposal. There's something which makes you unmissable. The opportunity to work with you is so great that 5,000 will eclipse the 4,500 because you can guarantee somebody at some point is going to beat you on price. And actually, I think price more recently has become even more competitive, with things like page builders and, dare I say it, people who are younger than me, who have different setups in their lives. They might not have a family. They might not yet have the kind of commitments that I have. They maybe legitimately have a lesser number for the year that they need to work with. So they can legitimately beat me on price. And so you've got to work hard to overcome that.
Yeah. It's interesting. When we're talking about price, we've got our first job coming up and we're having to think about how we might price it. There'll be a few things. The location and what we think would be the expectations of the target audience. Are they going to come into it? Location definitely has, worldwide obviously has an impact on what you're likely to charge. Where I'm presently living in India, the costs are probably a quarter of what your costs will be, Nathan, or certainly what mine were in London.
Yeah.
So if I wanted local people, that would change things. But Is there also a sort of, we know this is a lawyer. We know that they charge well for their services. Would that have an impact, do you think, on the pricing that you might present to that person?
Do you know, I think it inevitably would. If you were in an industry where it was obviously very, the margins were very tight. I can't summon anything to mind at the moment, but, an industry which is traditionally hard up, there's very little money floating about. I'm sure you can identify one in your head. Think of that industry. It is going to make a difference where typically lawyers have a reputation for being well paid. They're very overworked. They're very keen to, take in new work, get new leads, because there's a lot of churn, I think, in legal work. And they're very likely to have a kind of professional, shall we say, a kind of regimented approach to doing things. They're lawyers, and this, I think, would all feed into the price. I would imagine, subliminally or otherwise, you are going to be erring on the side of a larger fee than a smaller fee. I mean, that might not be the case for you. Perhaps you are not thinking about it in the same way, but I think I would be more happy to submit a larger fee to a lawyer than I would to X industry where the profits are significantly less.
Yeah. I think in the next episode, we'll talk about scoping, so I don't want to wander too much in there. But sometimes people come initially with some basic brief and ask you, the first email could just be literally, I'm looking for a website for this, small website, how much? Do you get that?
I have had that lots of times, and my reaction to that is, can we get on a call?
Okay,
One of the things that I find works for me is literally speaking to people, in the same way that you and I are talking. If possible, I will go to where they are, because I find that is even more effective. I feel that once you've made a physical, once you've been in their physical presence, you get the impression as to whether you're going to click or not. There's been times where I've gone to somebody's office and it's been very obvious as I've left the door that actually, do you know what, we're just not compatible. Something weird went on there and I didn't get a good vibe, and the opposite is true. And so that's what I do. And then I desperately try to say, to get some indication of what the budget is. And it might be as blunt as, what's your budget? But it might be more of, have you had a website before? Can you remember what that cost? Just to get some sort of... And also, you'll get an idea of the surroundings. If they're in a big swanky office with, Macs lying around unused all over the place and people seemingly busy, industrious, and so on, you're going to get an idea of where they're going to be positioning themselves as well. But I always want to know kind of what their budget is.
Yeah. Do you know what? I was thinking about that recently. I mean, I've always tried to do the same thing. I've never got it out of people with the budget. And I realized, because we were talking earlier about this, it's kind of this sort of BS thing that we all go through, where they pretend to know what it is that they really want. And we pretend to know that we can deliver whatever they've imagined they want. And we kind of just in our sizing each other up, aren't we, all the way through it? So it's never in the client's interest to want to reveal their budget too early.
No, it's interesting because there are all sorts of ways that you can make this a little bit easier. Obviously it requires honesty, but one of the things that I learned many years ago was in the lead generating form. So there's a form on the website, and people are inquiring about a website. You make that form slightly more robust and complicated than it ought to be. And the process there is simply that anybody that sticks and gets through that form is probably more interested than somebody who got through a form which literally said, would you like a website? Yes, tell us about the kind of website. There's 2 fields. Mine's probably got 15 fields to get through. And one of them is, it's not exactly asking what the budget is, but basically it's saying, do you imagine spending this, or this? And it increasingly gets more pricey. And I think people at that point, because they're filling in a form and they've made a bit of an effort, it tends to be on the lower side, but still, occasionally you get one drop through where it's on the higher side, and you think, okay, that's interesting. They're realistic. They know things might cost that much. This is probably one that I want to be following up very carefully.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of qualifying clients as well.
That's the word. Yeah.
Because you set the low end of what you're prepared to work with someone at, so you kind of already led them into some idea of the range of prices you'll work in. So that does take some of that out of it. I mean, I guess we all do that to some degree. Shall we talk a bit about pricing models, which I really strictly think is only two: fixed fee and value pricing. And fixed fee being the more traditional one, where you have a service and you cost out and work out what you need, how much things cost and to make it, what you need to get in profit, and then you set your price, and then that delivers value to someone who buys it, effectively like a client. Where the value pricing has that turned on its head, where you start with the client, find out what they are all about, what gives them value, what will add value to them. Then you work out your price, and then you do your kind of costing and your service. So it's kind of flipped on its head, the whole model. So
can I ask you a question at this point? Which one of those instinctively do you like more?
Fixed fee.
Yeah.
It's the only one for my model I think I can probably get away with anyway.
Yeah.
And it's the only one I've known. But yeah, I think value pricing, though, is interesting.
Yes. Yeah, but it's curious because I'm the same. There's something about the stability of the fixed fee and the predictability of the fixed fee. And essentially, it's a binary thing. It's either a yes or a no, isn't it? You just get this yes, no answer at the end, and you know where you are with that. And it's once you've done it a number of times, it's easier to figure out how to generate that fixed fee and work out what the costings are. And if a complicated build comes through, you spend more time on it, you work it out, and the number is higher. And if a simple build comes through, I know that in this scenario you haven't done that yet, but you would have to work out how many hours you think it's going to take based upon your experience and so on and so forth. So it's just easier for me to manage, and it just kind of works with the way my brain works better, I think.
Yeah, it kind of feels more honest, and that's why I like it. But the interesting thing is, and really we are in an industry which is ripe for the value pricing, isn't it? And I would imagine most of the courses out there that show you how you can sell your web design services will favor the value pricing, and it's ideal because we do need to talk to the client first and work out what is going to be of value to the custom product that we are delivering to them. It kind of makes sense for it to be that way round. And it does allow you then to find out what they're willing to pay and what solutions you're going to provide. So it has a lot of allure to it, and it makes a lot of sense of why some people are very passionate. That's the only way you should do it. The standard thing, isn't it, that you shouldn't be trading your time for dollars, and you should go this value pricing.
Yeah. Do you think value pricing, it's a slightly bizarre question, but do you think value pricing requires a kind of salesman-like personality more than the fixed pricing does? In that you can kind of put the fixed pricing down on a piece of paper and literally put it in the post or send it through email, and somebody can read through it, and you don't really have to have I don't know. I'm struggling to get the words here, but do you know what I mean? There's this sort of salesman-like quality to being able to persuade somebody, because I imagine it's very unlikely at the beginning a client is going to see the value pricing for themselves. You are going to have to spell it out to them. You're going to have to go through all the hoops of, okay, so if we achieve this thing, imagine what could happen to your business as a result of us adding this to your website. If we could get you 15 more leads a week, imagine what that would lead to your business's bottom line. You've got to be good at selling what they haven't already got in their business, and I think that is maybe why I sort of run scared of it a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be a salesperson, but also in a way you've got to ask them some fairly intimate questions about their business and what they project, which they might not expect they're doing. For a lot of people, they're just coming, I want somebody who can build me a website. That's their job. I don't want them involved in my business. That's what I'm employing them to do. I'm looking for someone to hire to do that job. And in order to do the value pricing right, you've got to start asking them some questions about the pain points in their business and what you might be able to solve for them to make that kind of work. And I know some people who have, I've got all the scripts, who've been on courses. We've got a mutual friend of ours who really fell foul of this. They were such a fan of what they'd learned, and they were going to apply this value pricing. They had a script how they were going to ask certain questions to their clients and work out how they'll take it from there to find out what would be of value for them. But with the people that they were going for, they completely knew that they were being sold stuff, and they blocked them. They just said, what would add value? Nothing. Do you want more customers from? We don't need customers from our website. It just needs to be there. And they just knew what was being done to them, and they weren't having it.
Right. Okay. So first thing to say, being the cynical Yorkshireman that I am, if I feel a tiny bit that I'm being upsold things and I didn't ask for it, there is some part of me which goes, no, just stop now. It's like when you get to the till or something and somebody tries to, do you want this with that? Or, you're in like fast food joint and they try to upgrade what you want to eat. But in my head, I'm like, no, I've just told you what I want to get. Can I just, please, may I have that? Do you want fries with that kind of mentality? I think you have to be good at combating that. And as you said, the person that we both know, it was obviously a struggle to persuade people of that. Now, maybe you'll be really good at that. I don't think I am, so I stay away from it. Maybe you are brilliant. And I have met people, nothing to do with website building. I have met people, I'm sure you have as well, who literally could sell anything to anybody. They are just gifted with that. And I think if you are gifted in that way and you are good at figuring out what a business would benefit from having, and you can explain that and make them excited about it, you are obligated to use value pricing because you'll do so much better.
And I also think in those people who have great successes with it and really believe in it, I think they have to spend a lot more time picking out the type of person they're going to attempt to do that on, the client that they're looking for, the ideal one, establish some kind of relationship with them so they trust them enough to be able to ask those big questions about the business and their pain points, to want to answer them. And I think that's quite a bit of work. So you might get paid a lot more, as a lot of these courses run, you get talking about 20, 30K on your jobs instead of getting, 1,000 or something on it because you've asked the right questions. And that may well be true, but I think there's also, you need to be in a position. And I don't think I've ever been in that position where the people who've come to me for, I want a website, how much is it going to cost me? I'm not going to be able to tell me about the pain points in your business very easily.
Yeah, and that also, I suppose, comes down to knowing the niche as well. If like me, you're just building websites for more or less anybody, then there isn't really a niche. But if I'd done, 15 lawyer websites, then maybe there's things that I've learned on that journey that are really going to help them. Some little tweak that could be made which genuinely will be of interest and use to them. Yeah, maybe that's possible. You never know. You might have been a lawyer yourself and know that kind of thing inside out, and you've turned to doing website design, and you can speak to their pains and you can make them understand that these pains can go away and the internet can help with that. Then it makes sense.
I think, the one thing that the value pricing does add to, at least, even though I'm not going to use it, I know that because it's not going to work for me. I take some of it from it because they often start with some very interesting points. The one that you mentioned, we don't know the price of anything. Nobody does. It's all something that we just look at other information and we think that must be it, but we're unsure. And you're certainly unsure with something that you're asking to be custom made for you. So, that's the one thing, and getting to the fact that, well, actually it's not the product they want to buy at a set price. It is somehow they want to get something from it in some form or another. So I think even if you go fixed fee eventually, I think the value of that comes out of thinking about value pricing is really useful. But I think it can go wrong. Can I just say where I think?
Please.
Because I think it can often lead people to say, okay, I'll put all my efforts into being a good salesperson who finds the right target, asks all the right questions, and then I can set this really high price. But I think sometimes what's not mentioned in people who kind of teach you to sell stuff is that you've got to deliver it. And if you've got somebody who's got the budget to pay 30K, they may expect you to be something you're not, like a whiz kid on coding and developing, where you're actually somebody like we are, implementers of WordPress solutions,
Yeah, that is a really good point. If you go in at a really high price, then the expectation is going to be that you are capable of doing things that high price would merit. And
Yeah.
I know you've got a lot to say on this because of the nature of the way that your business works. You're quite forthright and honest about this right at the outset, aren't you? You explain, and many people I think will find this counterintuitive. You explain your limitations right at the outset, don't you? I imagine most people would say, don't talk about what you are unable to do. That's business suicide, but you do.
I think, yeah, and I think there's an instinct for it. It's partly because it's going with this agile approach where the idea is to collaborate closely with the person you're working with. So in some ways, you can't do that BS stuff on them. I'm not going to take it away for agreed. They're going to work with me and they're going to see how much I'm working. So part of that's there because they're going to know me better because of the model I've picked. But also, I think the problem is with our industry, not many people trust web designers, do they? And I think almost that we have to go the other way and just say, I'm brave enough to say I don't know stuff.
You're shoring yourself up though nicely for future possible problems. Obviously, your budget is you're dealing with smaller budget businesses and smaller budget projects. And so explaining from the outset, I am a WordPress implementer. I'm going to be using a bunch of plugins. I didn't build the plugins, but I can use them, and the functionality that they come with is what we will have. Anything beyond the scope of that, really, you don't want to be using me if you want everything to be custom built. Not only is your budget ridiculous for that, but also I just won't be able to provide that. You'll need to look elsewhere. And I think you prevent down the road all sorts of problems occurring with people wanting to get the scope of everything bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, we've talked about this. We've both done it, haven't we, to some degree, where we've kind of BS'd our way through to a job that we can do and then have sleepless nights because we're not quite sure. Because when we started with it, what they said, we go, oh yeah, I know there's a plugin for that, and then suddenly they want that plugin to behave differently, and we can't recode it.
Yeah. So let's dwell on that point for a minute because we're trying to play the part of the person who is doing this for the first time, and this is your first customer. You probably will be plagued by this. There will probably be bits where you are thinking to yourself, oh my goodness me, they've asked me for something. I've never done it. I don't even know how to do that. I guess you've got to come up with tactics as a way of just, at least for now, not over-promising, getting yourself out of the room and going and seeing if you can actually do it. I think probably the worst thing that you could do is say, that's a piece of cake. I can easily do that. And like you said, David, both you and I have done that, and you regret it because it'll come back to haunt you. I think a good tactic is to, if let's say you're in the room with them, you just write it down as a line item, and you've got to come up with some language which you're comfortable with, but something along the lines of, okay, that's an interesting idea. I'll certainly look into that. I'll see what I can do about that, and I'll come back to you in a few days' time. Is that all right?
And there's a client that I'm still doing a project with where this is the 7th project I've actually done for them, but it's another sort of division that are leading it. And, I've been saying, and I'm so pleased I have from the beginning that, look, I'm just an implementer and I've got some skills. I'm pretty good with the CSS and stuff like JavaScript that you might want on there. Not so much if it needs to do multiple things at the same time. I'm out. And I'm so pleased I've done it because the brief has changed so much from because when they asked me first, can I do that? And I said, yes, no problem. But we're now on something like the 3rd or 4th iteration where it's completely different in its functionality, and I'm so pleased I set it up where I said this is my limits and you're quite welcome, or I can hire somebody in who can do this stuff, because it would have been so awkward. Honestly,
I guess the opposite may be true though. You might be a really dynamic, quick learner, somebody that can turn your attention to something brand new, and within a short space of time you can figure it out. You may be brilliant at acquiring new things and figuring new things out, and you've got plenty of time in your life to spend evenings working through the code and all of that kind of stuff. And so don't discount that. If you feel that you can do it and it is within your reach, and history has shown that you can rise to all these challenges, well, then I guess you go for it. But that was never me. I was always more on the sort of cautious, not trying not to overpromise, occasionally overpromising and regretting it. So I guess you've got to figure out where it lies for you.
Yeah, a lot of people love this job because those challenges will come in and then they'll just have to, ride it out and work it out. And that's what they love about it. That's what teachers are. And in fact, the first jobs I did where I didn't make it clear my limitations, they did help me. They did stretch me to learn more.
Well, that is a really good point, and it is one of the reasons why this job is so interesting, because you are learning stuff. And if you only ever did things that you'd already done, I think you would sort of come to resent the job fairly quickly, because it would be fairly boring and straightforward. So yes, there's got to be a certain amount of learning, and I guess if you're doing this for the first time, more or less everything will be learning. You've probably just got to get yourself out of that conversation, out the room, and just figure out where the boundaries of what you can cope with are. If somebody literally comes to you, if our lawyer client comes to you and says, I want a bespoke CMS written in React that is going to come in under $2,000 and, it needs this feature and that feature, yeah, maybe that's too much. But if it's just, I want a website with a few forms and perhaps some sort of, some sort of live video component or something weird like that, then maybe all of that's doable for you, and it's a bit beyond reach because you haven't done it, but it's not totally beyond reach.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to pricing, a big feature in this isn't just the job that's happening. So a fixed fee for that, but there'll also be really what I'm hoping to get, which is the care and the hosting to come out of them and this long-term relationship. So that's partly why the honesty needs to be there in the front, because I just want them to stick with me and keep paying me some small amount for years in the future without really disturbing me too much, which is how it's, how the business is still enjoyable for me, because that's what's happened, so
yeah. So
yeah,
I think with your sorry, I was just going to ask, with your Agile hat on, you're going to go with the fixed pricing, right?
Yeah, I'm going to, because for anyone who didn't catch it before, the Agile stuff, the idea is that you're iteratively working. So I would be probably going to our lawyer saying, let's get your website up pretty quickly. It doesn't have to be perfect. We'll get it up and it's out there getting you customers. So, rather than long project, spend out time, we'll do it very cheaply. We'll get it out and then we'll come back over it, work together, and we'll make it better over the time. Because neither you nor I know really what we'll learn from doing it. That's the argument. So that's, effectively what, I forgot what the question was.
Well, no, it was just whether the Agile binds to fixed pricing better in your head.
Yeah. So sorry, that was where I was going with it. So effectively, I will quote for what they would call in Agile, if you're using the Scrum method, which is a sprint of work. So something done within about 2 to 4 weeks at maximum, something that is clearly focused on getting just some of the things that they want up and running. So basic site where there's a contact form might be all that they need. But, for all we know, this lawyer might need all sorts of extra stuff, I don't know, membership area or something like that on their site. So
yeah, I think my model, my waterfall model, would actually work with the value pricing. I think it totally could work, because you're talking to them more. You're really trying to find out everything that could possibly be done so that you can give them the website and hand it over on the final day. So there'll be a lot of toing and froing and backwards and forwardsing, and maybe in that process all sorts of things drop out where you think, actually, do you know what? From everything that you've told me, I can see ways to improve this. I can see things that you've missed out. I can see things that you didn't, that you as the client never thought of. So I think my system, my waterfall model, could work with value pricing. It is just to say that I don't ever do it. I never seem to get into those conversations because I think personally I need the clarity. But I totally think that it could be done.
And it's really the only one that you can do it from. But from an Agile perspective, it has a failing because it assumes that you can agree upfront what is expected as an end deliverable and set a price on that, where the Agile model is going from the fact that you don't know and I don't know. And the only way we're going to learn is by doing. So let's start with something low cost, minimal risk, small period of time. We'll work together and work out what it is. And that list of things that you might want for your site might change over time as we as we start and do it,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, I can't value price it really very easy because they're going to see the work I'm doing. So I'll give a fixed price for a number of hours, if you like. So I've not really adapted, I mean, this is my learning process, so I'm still learning to do Agile, but effectively I've gone that way. But because I've set up these kind of billable days, if you like, which have got a deadline where we work quickly to produce something, and then you book another one and then book another one. So almost by accident, I've gone the Agile approach without knowing there was a real movement out there.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
Can we just I just want to go back to one thing I made as a note, and we skipped over it, and I think it's quite important with the pricing when you were doing either of them, is the fact that the example would be for me is that I started building a poxy little intranet with WordPress as an employee in my workplace, and it took off with my group because they weren't connected to the mainframe with the organization, and it would have cost me, if I was charging myself for the weekend work I did, it would be about £500 or something. They decided to build it as part of the civil service who I worked for, and in meetings alone, to get all the stakeholders involved in that, it must have been 8 to 10K of meetings alone without the actual build. So I think that's one thing we probably don't need to have to worry with our Miss A who we're trying to bid for, because it's probably likely to be her. But for all we know, she might have a team that we need to report to as well in this, and that's going to really change our pricing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good point. I always say that I want to deal with one person, but in the background of that one person, I mean, in our case, we've got this Miss A, so we know it's one person. It's probably relatively straightforward, but you never know how many stakeholders there are. And so each time that you go backwards and forwards, a decision needs to be made. It might be literally, the decision process might be costing the business hundreds of dollars. Because it's the wasted time in emails or the meeting that has to happen to make a decision about that one particular thing. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, I think winning the 30K job, the people who can pay that amount of money, I bet 20K of that has gone in really trying to get everybody on board and all the meetings and the stuff that goes on it.
Because from our end, we're only seeing the 30K that comes to us. Whereas from their end, that website might cost them 60 grand, and their accounting department will know that it costs 60 grand because they'll be counting all the meetings up and figuring out, whose time was spent where, and and also, if you think about the hour, the cost per hour ratio of some careers, lawyers, it's going to quickly add up if they're not doing lawyering and they're spending time in meetings.
Yeah. So, I mean, your model is good because you can do the value pricing should you choose to. And to some degree, I guess you do. I mean, I can't so much because I've kind of fixed rated and made it obvious what my sprints cost, if you like. So effectively, I've given away my hourly rate. So a lot of people would be tutting at me for doing it, but it matches my model. But you still effectively can value price. And to some degree, you will do that, as we talked about before, once you go and see the lawyer and she's got nice plush office and stuff like that.
Yeah, it is kind of more value pricing based upon what I think they can afford, as opposed to what I think I can deliver to them in terms of how I will grow their business. Do you know what I mean? It's a fairly blunt division there. But if I really work out that this particular client is incredibly wealthy and ostentatious with it, I think it's quite likely the number will be a little bit higher. Is that reasonable? That seems like human nature. Maybe I'm just being greedy.
No, I think it is. And also, this is the key thing about the value. The value of one lead to your lawyer may be much higher than the lead to my plumber.
That's right. Yeah, that is right. That's a good point. But okay.
Yeah, so I think we're coming to the end. We can just talk a little bit about pricing tactics that are available. Just we don't really use many of these, but discounting.
When you say discounting, are you meaning that you backpedal on a price that you previously offered? Do you mean that, or are you literally just sort of saying, if you get this, and this, if you combine all of these 4 different things that we're offering, we'll knock 10% off the overall price? Or are you sort of saying, okay, if the client pushes back, you just knock 10% off to make them happy, and we're off to the races?
To be honest, I just wrote the word. That's
I do think a real world example that I told you a minute ago. I think it is not a good idea to just suddenly slash the price of what you've proposed because of, let's say, client pushback. And in my real world example, I had a decorator come and quote for me, and I'm going to make some numbers up, but let's say that they quoted £5,000 to do some decorating work in my house. I then had another decorator come, and honestly, they both sounded reasonable, and they'd shown me the kind of things that they could do. I had every belief that they could both pull it off. And they quoted £2,000. So I went back to the first one at 5,000 and said, look, I can't go with you because I found a much cheaper quote. Thanks very much. And they sort of interrupted and said, how much was the other quote? And I said, well, it was 2,000. And they said, okay, I'll do it for 1,800. Instantly said those words. And at that moment, I was like, what? You've literally just knocked off £3,000 because I said some words. That immediately, I didn't want him to come and do the work for me because I felt like he was defrauding me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, I know exactly. I mean, maybe from their perspective, he's going to lose the job anyway, so why not just try this last thing?
That's right. But in my head, I don't mean estimation. I didn't lose any estimation for him because obviously, he was keen to get the work. But it 30 seconds before he was saying it's 5,000. A few seconds later, it's 1,800. The gulf was so huge that it pulled me up short. It was so huge. So maybe if the other guy had come in at 4.5 and he'd said 4,200. That felt more palatable. So when I'm saying this, what I mean is don't discount yourself out of credibility.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I don't think that can work. Actually, I could have combined this with another note that we've got here about putting up kind of fake high prices so you can discount them all the time, like the endless DFS furniture sale we have in the UK. And we know a lot of products as well out there on WordPress as well, who constantly you go to their site and they've got it automated that there's a sale running all the time. Discounting with a service, can it ever work, a discount?
Do you know what? I'm sure it works because it's deployed in every kind of commerce. It must work, right? I guess you've just got to be realistic about it. Is it a real discount or is it some sort of fake discount? If it's a fake discount, at some point somebody's going to call you out for it. Will the collateral damage of getting called out for it, will it hurt your business? I don't know. But if you've got millions of customers, probably not. But if you've just got one or two and you live in a little local place like I do, that could be catastrophic.
Yeah, I guess you've got to give a reason. If you're going to discount your service, where effectively they're hoping that you've costed what you think is your reasonable profit and your costs and your time to come up with this price. If you discount it, it always seems a little bit fake anyway, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Because, which of these has given way? I mean, you would need to maybe justify it like you were balancing out a low sales time in the year or something like that when you're not so busy, so you do a little discount. I think to make it creditable for a service, not a product, you would need to add some other element in that would make sense to the deal.
Yeah, I do like the model of discounting the more they spend, if you know what I mean. So let's say that there are 4 components to this website and they could only get the website going with the first bit. So let's say that's £1,000 or something like that. And then there's this other thing which costs another 500 and another thing at 500 and another thing at 500. I would be quite happy to say, look, I can knock 250 quid off the last 500 because you're going all in. Those kind of models feel like a good way of discounting because it works in both ways. You're getting more work and you're working more closely with them, but at the same time they feel like you've done them a favor.
Yeah, and it also makes sense, doesn't it? Because your business costs, which you have to factor in, is the fact that you need to go and get work out there. So if they keep you busy for longer, then you can discount them because you don't need to spend money on doing so much of that.
Right.
So it makes sense. So so discounts can work in that way.
I think
what
so.
About loss leaders, things that supermarkets do when they put something at a loss to pull people into their supermarkets?
Yeah, I literally can't afford to do that. it absolutely will work, won't it? So by loss leader, we're meaning, you put something on at such a ridiculously cheap price that everybody flocks to your store, and whilst they're there, it's inevitable that some of them will stray off and buy other things and that kind of idea. I've never done loss leaders because my business is, kind of time for money model more than anything else. And so I don't. I wouldn't, I don't think. Do you?
I talked to you before about one situation where I did, because I'm low price anyway. So, one of our sessions will be about 500 quid, which is maybe about $750. And that could build you a website, but generally I want, 2 or 3 days to do it well. But there was somebody who I knew, because I'd worked on another one of their sites, who just needed this personal site. They needed it to be up. They had one before it's fallen apart, and they didn't want to spend the 500 because they said, literally, I don't need it to do anything for my business. It just needs to be up there. No one will go to it. And I said, okay, you need to come in on a hosting and care plan. And I cut it right down, and we worked from a template. And I think maybe the hours that I spent on it meant there was no profit in it at all. But over the period of time, the hosting and care would made up for it. He doesn't contact us about anything, so he just keeps paying each year for that. So that
was more of an accidental loss leader, but it was.
Yeah, but it just made me think that, well, maybe I would do some of that in future a little bit more. I might drop my prices when someone had a good reason for doing so, and I wasn't really going to make much on making it. But if they're coming in for the long term on something that will make me money over the period, which is of course what the supermarkets are trying to do, aren't they? They're trying to lure you in so you'll buy other stuff from them, or just make them your supermarket, or you'll make them your supermarket. So
isn't that the same thing as the thing I was mentioning a moment ago, whereas if they buy all 4 things,
I guess
you get one of them cheaper? I mean, essentially you've done the math there, haven't you? And you've worked out that the maths means you get more. So you're not really losing out there, are you? It just seems like a slight different variation of a similar thing. I wonder if would you ever actually spend money to get a client in the hope that they would stick around? So see, that's where I'm imagining loss leader comes from. I'm actually hemorrhaging money on the promise that something good will happen in the future. This client will stay on my care plan for years and years. This client will come back and do a rebuild every 2 years or something like that. But in the meantime, I have actually lost money on the first thing. I can't do that.
Well, I guess in this case, I would have probably, because I guess we spent longer than we would have normally charged. So I lost my time rather than any actual payment for something else, which I lost on it. And again, it was still a gamble because, there's nothing that holds that person beyond a year on our care plan. So, there was still an element where it might have not been worth doing. So, you kind of have to go with a little bit of that. They probably will stay, and they did.
Well, I've definitely had loss leaders, which I never intended to be loss leaders, because just for the fact that, the man hours that were put in were so much bigger than I'd anticipated, and and you just want those jobs to come to an end. So unintentionally, I've done loss leaders. But there was never a plan to have it happen that way.
Another pricing tactic is the adding 97 to the end of any of the numbers that you give.
This is so interesting, isn't it? The psychology of putting a 7 on the end, or a few years ago it was 99. I mean, I grew up in the era where everything was something pounds and 99 pence. And I think it actually, on some level, it works. I've definitely done it. And I'm not trying to be clever about it. I just sort of see everybody else doing it and think, well, if everybody else is doing it, there's probably something in it. I don't know what the psychology there is, but 97 really, to my mind, doesn't sound like 50. Sorry, 100. I was thinking 47 there, because I know of something that I've sold recently which was 47, and it doesn't sound like 50. I think there's something in this.
Yeah, 47 is another one, isn't it? If you were aiming for the 150 or something on a product.
Yeah, 147, 97, 47, 247. I have to say, though, that my proposals more or less always end in a 0. It's just 2,000 or 1,000 or whatever it might be. It just I haven't really played those games when doing actual proposals, because it just seems like, they're probably actually going to stare at this number quite a lot. And if it says 999, they're probably going to be going, it's 1,000.
I rounded up all my numbers as well, even on the care plan where there's a table for these things, and they make their decision independent of anything I say. But I did this. I have to thank Iceland. I don't know if Iceland are around the world anywhere, because I noticed this is going back some time. They slipped from making things like their pizzas at 199 and just turned them into 2, and they make it a big round 2 with no .00. And for some reason, that fooled me into thinking everything got cheaper. Things that were £1 seemed suddenly cheaper than they were when they were 99.
Yeah,
I suddenly thought
we should take this in the other direction, shouldn't we? Everything should be 102. Or something like that, just go over, round it up a bit, and no, it's interesting. I mean, certainly from the sort of the packaging point of view on that, it's just easier to pass it's £2 as opposed to the 199, and you can kind of add up. If I get 3 of those, it's £6. If I get 3 of those at 199, how much is that? That's like $5.97 or something. I don't know. Yeah. I think there's something in this though. I think the fact that every single business seems to be doing it. I'd be curious if anybody knows if there's some sort of data to show that this is worth doing or not. Honestly, I'd be interested to know in the comments.
It's endless trickery though, isn't it? Because it used to be 99 and then it had to become 97 because everybody knew the 99. They automatically moved it up. So I think, it'll always have to change, won't it? Like I say, with Iceland fooling me suddenly by rounding it up. It seemed cheaper somehow, so you're going to have to keep shifting. So I don't bother with it at all. No. What about the last one we've got as a pricing tactic, which I think can only, well, maybe not, apply to things like care plans where you provide various different options, usually 3 or something, and one is to balance it out. So you put this very high price thing on, knowing that there will be a very small percentage of people who will always buy the top price thing. And that is so high that it makes the regular thing that most people buy look cheaper by comparison.
Yeah, I guess the idea here is that let's say you've got 3 care plans or 3 methods of building websites. You make the first one really cheap but utterly useless. So if anybody buys that, they immediately figure out, well, there's just nothing in this. That table's only got 3 ticks. And then you put at the opposite end, you put something so crazy overpriced that basically nobody's going to buy it. And then you put the middle one, which is the one you actually want people to buy, which is a reasonable amount. It's profitable for you, and it's the one you want to sell. I've tried this out. Do you know what's interesting, though? I never figured out that was what was going on until somebody explained it to me. I didn't independently figure out that that's what those pricing tables were up to. I was naive and thought, okay, that's the cheap one, that's the middle one, that's the more expensive one. They're all legit. It never occurred to me that there might be people out there who would use the first one and the last one to make the middle one seem like the right one to choose. Yeah.
You've pointed out to me on some products where people have been quite clever to move it the other way to get the high price. So software or something where you'll get the price is quite close to the highest cost in the middle one, and you get 100 license, but you get 1,000 on the next one. It's just like, for that small jump up for the number of extra licenses you get, you're always going to move up, even if you probably didn't think you were ever going to need that number of licenses. You pointed out a few of those.
Well, the interesting thing about that one is that usually that only seems to have 2 options, as opposed to there being 3 options where you're squashing from both sides into the middle. The middle one is the one you want to get. In this situation, you offer something which is totally reasonable for the first one, but then the second one is just outrageously good value for a little bit more money. And in this case, it's software licenses. So, it's not like you're spending hours making more software because you're giving away 1,000 licenses as opposed to 1 or unlimited or whatever. It's exactly the same to you. If you sell 1, it's the same as selling 1,000, except there's more money in it. So I see things like $97 for 3-site license, and then I see $197 for 1,000. And there is something in that which there's a tripwire there for me, and I fall over it all the time. I will buy very often the 1,000 one because I just think to myself, I can see myself going over the 3 quite easily. The reality is, I'll never go over the 3. I'm never going to use this on 3 sites. But there's something about it which says to me, do you know what, 1,000? That's really generous. So I think that's very effective. If you wouldn't want to do it with website builds. We'll build you 1,000 websites for twice the price of 2. No,
but I think there is a genuine model. Honestly, the person who got me most of my business, my old colleague, when she started back in 2000 with her web building business, she had basically 3 plans, which was bronze, silver, and gold. And it had feature sets. It was how many numbers of pages you would have or be allowed to have. So she could have easily used that tactic as well there. She could have said, you can have up to 1,000 pages or something.
I think, though, that in the era that you and I started building websites, I think that was a totally legitimate thing to do because you had to build every page. You really had to go in and create the HTML. And whilst there might have been an element of copying and pasting, you had to build it. You had to actually go in and create the .html page and start writing the markup and all of that. So there was actual work. Nowadays, it's a CMS. You just log in and create, add new, and I don't see that being all that effective nowadays. In fact, I think clients would be, what? You're going to charge me for the extra 1 page? Are you kidding?
Maybe. I think it still does exist.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
And you could argue the other way that it hasn't changed because when you copied your HTML, you copied. You got your homepage and then you copied all the layout that you did and just altered some bits and then copied it. You could do multiple sites. So I think
I misspoke there because obviously if you're designing each page, then that's legit. Yeah. But if it is literally CMS-based pages where you are, they're writing text into a page and that's all it is, or maybe uploading an image or something, I see that as a bit more of a stretch. I think, is that it? Are we done with pricing?
I think we are done. I mean, the only thing to say just with our different models is that you could try the tactics and I can't so easily again with this because of the models. Yep. So I think that's it. We've got just the last few questions, haven't we, to ask ourselves?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, pricing. I missed those. On our show notes, there's 5 questions. Yeah, okay. Let's go through these.
Yeah. So we can skip the first one because we've already talked about it, whether we're establishing a relationship is going to make a difference perhaps to our pricing than an end deliverable. So you could have, which I did a little bit in the first place, and some businesses have probably run around that, you can have where you're priced to work quickly with a client. So we know the difficulty now is that a lot of clients will come, they say they want a website, they know what it looks like, they don't know what it could do for their business. So if you want to get in and get out and get money off them quickly, you'll do maybe a 1-day build or very quickly and leave the complex stuff out that might come later. So when they're not getting the traffic they want, it's okay. We delivered you the website. You didn't ask that you wanted SEO or blah blah.
I think that's fine. If you're willing to do that and they're willing to do that. So it's basically a really like a cheaper version of a website because it's got hardly any features.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're just giving them what they want, which is what, still most of my clients don't really get the internet and what I might be able to do for their business. And all I want to do is, because I want this long relationship, is to, bombard them with this new information about what their website could do for them. And they don't care. Yep. So there's a legitimate model in just saying, I'm going to give you what you want. Yep. And that's the end of our relationship.
I think that's totally legit. If you've got space for that, then why not? You never know what might come of that. Yep.
This is just a silly question. Do we have an amount which will go below or above? Do we have a set one in our minds?
Do you know what? I think there must be an amount that I won't go below. I don't know what that number is off the top of my head, but there has to be an amount because obviously, I'm not going to build you a website for £4. That's just not going to happen. So anecdotally, there is a point at which I'm going to start thinking, do you know what? This isn't going to work out. And equally, there is a point that I won't go above. I mean, obviously, if I knew that I could walk up to somebody and say, this website with 5 pages that's going to take me 7 hours is £2 million, and I knew they were going to pay it, well then, no, there is no limit. I will accept that work for that fee. But realistically, everybody knows that the expectation is going to go up beyond a certain amount. So if you're building a website at $30,000, those people are going to want $30,000 worth of value out of it. And they're going to be asking questions. It's probable that you'll need a team of some kind at that point. So there definitely is a ceiling. I mean, what about you?
Yeah, there is with me. I mean, it's on my site, so you can see that really 500 is my kind of minimum, £500 that is. So again, it's $750 roughly. That's my minimum, and it's got a set number of hours that go with that sprint of work. So that's anybody who comes in below that is basically out of my range. But that's pretty low, isn't it?
Yeah.
For somebody, to get started on the work, and we possibly could deliver you a basic site for that. But as I say, I made that one exception, and it makes me think, well, I must question that there is potential, but it also goes with another caveat with that one, because I'm not interested in people who won't come on the care plan. So that's one of the first things I put in place. So they have at least 1 year of that to pay. So in fact, no one ever really, they're going to have to pay $800 really, in effect, because they have to pay for that up front as well. So yeah, I have a below. And like you, I guess, to be honest, I wouldn't be going above 10K. A lot of people will just go, what, really? Because I feel... But with my model, it's fine. I would do eventually over time if we're going through sprints of work. But if that was the initial cost of things, I wouldn't go through that. Yeah. I mean, it's easy for someone to pay me that amount of money over the time that I'll be working with them. That's not a deal. But I would feel uncomfortable at anybody who was expecting a website for that kind of money, because I believe I know what they would want.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think the low price, the one you won't go below, is basically what your business can't tolerate. You'd be better off spending that time looking for a different client. And the high one is more based around what the market will bear. It's more like, I can't charge that because literally nobody will pay it. And I'm sure everybody in this line of work has had those questions, like, should I send this proposal with that actual number? Really? Is that number too big? Oh, you've sent it and it's backfired, and you've probably sent a few and it's like, oh, it worked. Wow. Okay. What about this one? Do you have a price which you'd be happy to cut features out of if the client comes back and says, no, that's too high?
Nathan, answer that one yourself, because you talked about this earlier and I loved it.
So I think this is quite I wonder how many people have done this. In your proposal, have you ever put in things that they will not need, safe in the knowledge that you can cut that out later so that you are able to sort of bring down the price? I don't mean it's a bit like that pricing table that we spoke about earlier. The third option, which nobody's going to pick, has got loads of things in that nobody ever needs. That could be a tactic, I guess. I find we're straying into the realms here of being a bit disingenuous. Well, in fact, being very disingenuous. But I have had clients who have come to me and they've had these very, very grand ideas of what their website wants to be. And then you throw the cost back at them and they say, whoa, that's a lot of money. And then you say, well, what about if we took that out? You'd still have a website and we could take that out and it'd still work perfectly fine. And actually, in most cases, I know that they don't need them anyway. So it's easy for me to pull those things out. So yes, that can work.
I think that's a really, really good way of kind of putting, you'll give them the features if they're going to pay the full price, but it does give you a route to be able to backtrack, unlike, your decorator.
That's right. Yeah.
It gives you a way that legitimately say, oh, okay, we can knock these things out, or you maybe can do them later,
That's right. Yeah. And it might be, trifling little things like, I don't know, you don't need a chat widget just yet because, you haven't got a sales team organized. It'll just be you and the chat will get in the way of your life. And okay, let's pull that out, or whatever it might be. You don't need the membership area now. You don't have any leads. We can do that later. That sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that's really great. I hadn't really even thought about that before. It's not going to be appropriate for my model because I'm not doing propositions with mine, but I love the idea. Last one that we've got here really is, do we ever give a low price and then upsell the add-ons to what we have? So, in my case, effectively, I do that because of the care and hosting has to come. So there is an upsell on the price of the website.
Yeah, I think for me the answer would be basically no. The number that I've got on that proposal is really the number. And whilst there might be add-ons, those add-ons are literally that. You are adding to the price. It's not a question of me lowering the price and hoping that the add-ons come in, because then I'm in a sticky situation. Whereas if they don't want any of the add-ons, I am then cutting the price, doing what we talked about earlier. Literally lowering the price in order to get the work, and the base price has to be something I can work with. So it has to be something that if they accept only that, I'm happy with that. But yeah, you've written down things like, add on keyword research, maybe some extra testing, or it could be some work around browsers. That whole browser thing was really an add-on in the day, wasn't it? You could genuinely say, and we'll test it in Internet Explorer 6. And that was a legitimate thing to do. Nowadays, I feel like there's very little difference between all the browsers.
Yeah, there are some things. I mean, still some things which are just kind of experimental, or just be in Firefox and Chrome, and then won't be in the others. So it could be a factor, and just the testing of it as well, because there will be some different displays if the branding, just something very simple as filling out the forms. There are certain things that you can't style with CSS directly at the moment. You might kind of want to work with that silly stuff, which I don't think we'll get into. I guess there's one upsell that I have, and it's because of my agile approach, the idea that I'm going to go to our client and going to say, we don't know where we start. Maybe we ought to start with stuff. The thing that I often want to do is keyword research with people. I want them to do that before we even start the site. So by saying a small sprint and a minimal viable website is what we're aiming for, so it's low cost. But please, let's do the keyword research, because for your thing, if we get that wrong, you're probably not going to get the visitors, and we're all wasting our time for the rest. So in a way, I do often start with that upsell.
Yeah, fair enough if it works for you, but it is a genuine upsell, right? It isn't. You're not cutting out the cost at the beginning. You are adding the cost on if they go for it. Yeah. I think that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we don't know what their cost is going to be with the agile approach. We know how much it's going to be to get the minimum site, and then it's going to be entirely up to them how much they're going to spend on top of that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Hey, David, guess what? I think this is the longest episode we've ever done.
Oh no!
I know. We're at roughly an hour and 8 minutes. In this, I know. I wonder if there's a single human being that's got to this point. I suspect the answer is no. So, pricing is done in our little business series, which is fabulous. So that was episode 2 of series 1. Should we just quickly say what's going to be episode 3?
Yes, getting a brief. Well, we'll just try being brief.
Yes, that's right. Getting to be brief. Yeah, okay, I like it. So scoping out the project, that kind of thing. Yeah, okay.
That's it.
Perfect. All right, thank you. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. Thanks a lot.
Bye. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that. There's always more to these debates than meets the eye. There's always a ton more once you start exploring and getting into the weeds of it. So today we were talking about pricing. Perhaps you agree with us or disagree with us, or think perhaps we missed something out. Either way, if you want to add a comment, you can head over to wpbuilds.com and search for episode 259, or go to wpbuilds.com/Facebook. That is our Facebook group, and you could do the same thing. Search for the thread for episode number 259. Like I said at the top of the show, we're taking a couple of weeks off. I would hope that if you are also taking some time off, I would wish you a very happy holiday season. We will be back on the 6th of January in 2022. So stay safe for a couple of weeks, and I will see you soon. I'm going to fade in some cheesy music and say bye-bye for now.